The ground shook again, just like it did yesterday when the big tuskers came through. Mama says I shouldn't go near them, but how can I not? They're the most amazing things I've ever seen, with their long curved teeth that shine like wet river stones in the sun. Papa calls them mastodons, though I don't know why they need such a fancy name when hairy elephants works just fine. My name is Todd, and I've lived 12 summers now. That's old enough to hunt with the men, Papa says, though Mama still treats me like I'm barely walking. We live in what Papa calls the Good Valley, where the river bends and makes pools perfect for fishing. The trees here grow so thick you can barely see the sky in some places, and the berries are sweeter than anywhere else we've traveled. I remember the first time I saw one of the really big cats. Not the ones with the long teeth that hang down, those are scary enough, but the giant ones that Papa says used to be even bigger when his grandfather was young. This one was sleeping on a rock ledge above our camp, and its paws were bigger than my whole head. I stood there frozen, holding the water gourds I was supposed to be filling, just staring at it. The cat opened one eye, looked at me like I was the most boring thing in the world, and went back to sleep. I ran all the way back to camp without spilling a drop, which Mama said was a miracle. Our tribe isn't very big, maybe 40 people when everyone's together. But we don't always stay together. Sometimes families go off on their own for a while, following herds or looking for better fishing spots. We always come back together for the cold season though, when the leaves turn colors and fall like rain. The best part about living here is all the animals. There are so many kinds I can't even count them all. The giant ground sloths are my favorites after the mastodons. They're taller than 3 grown men standing on each other's shoulders, and they have these huge claws that look terrifying but they only use them to pull down tree branches. They move so slowly it's like watching clouds drift across the sky. Sometimes I follow them just to see where they're going, but they never seem to be going anywhere in particular. One time, my friend Kala and I found a baby ground sloth that had gotten separated from its mother. It was only as tall as us, which meant it was really young. Its fur was softer than rabbit fur, and it made these little humming sounds that made my chest feel warm. We tried to help it find its mother, but it just wanted to eat leaves and sleep. Eventually, we heard the mother calling, a sound like thunder rumbling in the distance, and the baby perked up and shuffled off toward the sound. Kala and I followed at a safe distance until we saw them reunite. The mother sniffed her baby all over and then gave us a look that might have been grateful, or might have been warning us to stay away. It's hard to tell with sloths. The river is where everything happens in our valley. All the animals come there to drink, and that's where we do most of our fishing and hunting. Papa taught me how to make fish traps from bent saplings and vines, and how to read the water to know where the big fish like to hide. The catfish in our river grow bigger than I am, with whiskers as long as my arms. They taste best when Mama wraps them in leaves with herbs and cooks them in the coals. But the river can be dangerous too. The giant beavers that live there are usually peaceful, but they don't like it when you get too close to their lodges. These aren't like the small beavers I've heard about in stories. These are as big as bears, with teeth that can cut through tree trunks as thick as my body. One time I saw 2 of them working together to bring down a huge oak tree. It took them most of the day, but when it finally fell, the crash was so loud that birds flew up from the trees for as far as I could see. The dire wolves are the ones that really scare me though. They're not like the regular wolves that sometimes howl at night. Dire wolves are massive, with heads as big as my whole chest and teeth that could crack bones like twigs. They hunt in packs, and when they're on the trail of something, nothing stops them. Papa says they're noble creatures that only take what they need, but I've seen what's left after a dire wolf pack brings down a mastodon. It's not pretty. Last winter, a pack of dire wolves came too close to our camp. We had killed a giant elk, the kind with antlers so wide that 2 men can stand between the points, and the smell must have drawn them. I woke up in the middle of the night to growling that made my bones feel cold. Papa and the other men grabbed their spears and formed a circle around the camp, while Mama held me and my little sister close. The wolves circled us for what felt like forever, their eyes glowing green in the firelight. Finally, Uncle Grin threw a burning branch at the biggest wolf, and it yelped and led the pack away. Nobody slept the rest of that night. But not everything here wants to eat us. The giant armadillos are funny creatures that look like walking boulders. They're as big as our shelters, with shells so hard that even saber-toothed cats can't bite through them. They dig enormous burrows that we sometimes use for shelter during storms. Once, during a really bad thunderstorm, our whole family crowded into an abandoned armadillo burrow. It smelled like dirt and old armadillo, but it was dry and safe. My sister found some old armadillo scales in the back, each one as big as my hand. She kept them and made them into a necklace that rattles when she walks. The horses here are different from the few small ones I've seen in other valleys. These are sturdy and strong, with thick necks and fuzzy coats. Some of the young men in our tribe have been trying to get close to them, thinking maybe they could ride them like in the old stories. So far, all they've gotten are bruises and embarrassment. The horses here are wild and want to stay that way. I watched my cousin Brack try to jump on one's back once. The horse just stood there for a moment, like it couldn't believe someone would be so stupid, then it bucked him off into a thorn bush. We laughed about that for days. Food is usually plentiful here, which is why we stay. Besides the fish and big game, there are roots and berries and nuts everywhere. Mama knows every plant in the valley and what it's good for. She taught me which mushrooms will fill your belly and which ones will make you see spirits. The acorn trees drop so many nuts in the fall that we can gather baskets and baskets full without even making a dent. We grind them into flour and make cakes that last through the winter. But my favorite food comes from the bee trees. The bees here make their homes in hollow trees, and their honey is the sweetest thing in the world. Getting it is dangerous though. You have to smoke them out first, and even then, some always stay behind to defend their home. I've been stung so many times I barely feel it anymore, but it's worth it for that golden sweetness. We trade honey with other tribes sometimes, and they always want more than we can spare. The weather in our valley is mostly good, but when storms come, they come hard. I've seen lightning split trees in half and rain fall so hard you can't see your hand in front of your face. During the worst storms, the river rises and floods the low places. That's when we see animals we don't usually see, all crowded together on the high ground, predators and prey side by side, too worried about the water to fight each other. There was one storm, maybe 3 summers ago, that was the worst I can remember. The sky turned green-black in the middle of the day, and the wind started howling like 100 dire wolves. We barely had time to get to shelter before it hit. Trees were falling everywhere, and the rain came sideways, stinging like thrown pebbles. When it was over, the valley looked different. Paths we'd used forever were blocked by fallen trees, and the river had carved a new channel in some places. We found a family of giant ground sloths huddled under a rock overhang, looking as miserable as we felt. Even they seemed grateful when the sun finally came out. The changing seasons bring different challenges and gifts. Spring is when everything comes alive again. The mastodons return from wherever they go in winter, and their babies are the most adorable things you've ever seen. They're still bigger than me, but they're clumsy and playful, always getting into trouble. I saw one get its trunk stuck in a hollow log once, and it trumpeted and spun in circles until its mother came and pulled the log off with her own trunk. Summer is hot and lazy. Even the predators don't want to hunt much in the middle of the day. That's when we do most of our swimming and fishing. The river is cool and clear, and if you know where to look, you can find deep pools perfect for diving. We have contests to see who can hold their breath longest or swim the farthest underwater. I usually win the breath holding because I've been practicing since I was little, pretending to be a giant beaver. Fall is the busy time. Everyone's gathering food for winter, not just us. The squirrels go crazy collecting nuts, and some of them are as big as dogs. They chatter at us when we gather from the same trees, like we're stealing from them. The mastodons eat constantly, putting on fat for the cold months. And the salmon run up the river in numbers so thick you could almost walk across on their backs. We smoke so much fish during salmon season that everything smells like smoke for weeks. Winter is when we tell stories. The old people remember things from when they were young, and their parents told them stories from even longer ago. That's how I know that this valley wasn't always like this. Grandfather Mako says when he was a boy, there were even more kinds of animals, and some of them were even bigger than what we have now. He talks about birds with wings so wide they blocked out the sun, and cats with teeth as long as my forearm. Some people think he's making it up, but I believe him. If giant ground sloths and dire wolves can be real, why not even stranger things? We're not the only people in this land, of course. There are other tribes, some friendly, some not so much. We trade with the river people, who live further downstream where the valley opens up. They're better at making boats than we are, and they bring us shells and pretty stones from places we've never been. The mountain people come down sometimes, bringing furs and special plants that only grow up high. They tell stories about caves full of bear skulls and paintings on the walls that show animals nobody has seen in generations. But the forest people we avoid. They live deeper in the woods, and something about them feels wrong. Papa says they've forgotten how to be human, that they've lived with the animals so long they've become like them. I've only seen them once, from a distance, and they moved through the trees like shadows. Their faces were painted with mud and blood, and they didn't walk like normal people. They kind of flowed, like water or smoke. Mama made us leave that area right away, and we didn't go back for a whole season. Our tools are simple but they work. Papa's spear is his pride, the point made from a stone he found and shaped himself, hafted to a shaft he selected and smoothed it over many nights by the fire. He showed me how to make my own, how to choose the right stone and strike it just so to make sharp flakes. My first spear point was crooked and dull, but Papa said it was good for a first try. I've gotten better since then. My current spear has a point as sharp as any of the men's, and I've used it to fish and hunt small game. We make other things too. Baskets from river reeds, so tight they can hold water. Clothes from the hides of animals, scraped clean and worked until they're soft as clouds. Mama makes the best clothes in our tribe. Her secret is using brains to tan the hides. It sounds gross, but it works better than anything else. She decorates them with beads made from seeds and small shells, and dyes from plants that make colors brighter than flowers. Fire is life for us. We always keep at least one fire going, even in summer. Losing fire means cold food, dark nights, and no protection from the things that hunt in darkness. I learned to make fire when I was 8 summers old, using a bow drill and dry moss for tinder. It took me so many tries that my hands were raw and bleeding, but when that first tiny ember glowed and then burst into flame, I felt like I had stolen power from the sun itself. We use fire for everything. Cooking, of course, and warmth. But also for hardening spear points, for driving away insects, for signaling other groups, and for the ceremonies that mark important times. When a boy becomes a man or a girl becomes a woman, we build a special fire with wood from 7 different trees. The smoke is supposed to carry messages to the spirits, telling them that someone new has joined the adult world. The spirits are everywhere here, in every rock and tree and animal. We don't worship them exactly, but we respect them. Before a hunt, we ask the spirits of the animals to forgive us for taking their lives. After a successful hunt, we thank them and make sure to use every part of the animal so nothing is wasted. The worst thing you can do is kill something and leave it to rot. That makes the spirits angry, and angry spirits can bring bad luck for generations. I've seen things that make me believe in spirits. Like the time I was alone by the river and saw a mastodon that glowed with soft light, like moonlight on water. It looked at me with eyes that seemed too intelligent for an animal, then walked into the forest and disappeared. When I told Papa, he said I had seen a spirit mastodon, probably the grandfather of all mastodons, checking to make sure we were treating his children with respect. Or the time during a full moon when Kala and I saw the ghost cats dancing. They looked like regular saber-tooth cats, but you could see through them like smoke. They were playing and leaping in a meadow, and their movements were so beautiful it made my chest hurt. We watched until clouds covered the moon, and then they were gone. We never told anyone about that because we knew they wouldn't believe us. Music is important to us too. We make drums from hollow logs and animal skins, and flutes from bird bones and reeds. The sounds carry far in the valley, especially at night. Sometimes when we're playing music, the wolves howl along, and it creates a harmony that makes everyone stop and listen. Uncle Grin says music is how we talk to the world, and the world talks back. We dance too, especially during celebrations. When someone gets married, or when a baby is born, or when the salmon run starts, we dance. The dances tell stories, about hunts, about seasons, about love and loss and joy. I'm not a very good dancer yet, but I'm learning. The girls laugh at me when I trip over my own feet, but they also show me the steps again, patient as the river wearing down stones. Marriage in our tribe is simple but meaningful. When 2 people want to be together, they tell the elders. If the elders agree it's a good match, there's a ceremony where the couple jumps over a fire together, holding hands. The fire is supposed to burn away their old lives so they can start fresh together. Then everyone feasts and dances until dawn. I've been to 3 weddings, and they're always the happiest times. Death is part of life here. We lose people to accidents, to sickness, to age, sometimes to predators. When someone dies, we wrap them in their best clothes and bury them with their favorite things. We put red ochre on their faces to help the spirits recognize them. Then we sing the death songs that guide them to the next world. The songs are sad but also beautiful, talking about how death is just another journey, like following the river to find where it meets the sea. I've lost people I cared about. My grandmother died 2 winters ago, just went to sleep and didn't wake up. She was the one who taught me which stars to follow if I ever got lost, and how to find water by watching where the birds fly at dawn. We buried her on a hill overlooking the valley she loved, with her grinding stones and her favorite shell necklace. Sometimes I still go there and tell her about things I've seen, like she's just resting and will open her eyes any moment. The stars are our map and our calendar. Papa taught me the patterns, the hunter, the great bear, the river of light that flows across the night sky. He says people have been watching these same stars since the beginning of time, and they'll keep watching them long after we're gone. When I look at the stars, I feel both very small and part of something enormous. We mark time by the moon and the seasons. 13 moons make a year, and each moon has a name. The hunger moon in late winter, when food is scarce. The flower moon in spring, when everything blooms. The thunder moon in summer, when storms are common. The harvest moon in fall, when we gather everything we can. Each moon brings its own challenges and gifts. Learning is constant here. Every day brings new lessons. How to read the sky for weather changes. How to track an animal by the smallest signs, a broken twig, a tuft of fur, the pattern of its droppings. How to find medicine plants and prepare them properly. How to make tools that won't break when you need them most. The old people are libraries of knowledge, and they share it freely with anyone willing to listen. I've learned that the giant beavers are most active, and I'll continue the story from where it left off, bellies. I knew where the best watercress grew, which trees had edible inner bark, how to find burdock roots even in winter. This knowledge, hard won through hunger, would stay with me all my life. One day in April, just when we thought things couldn't get worse, they did. Lord Ashford announced he was clearing his estate. The potato failure had meant his tenants couldn't pay rent, and he'd decided sheep would be more profitable than people. The bailiffs came with crowbars and torches, pulling down cottages and turning families out onto the road. We watched from our doorway as the Murphys' cottage came down. They'd lived there for 3 generations, but that meant nothing now. Mrs. Murphy stood in the rain, holding her baby, watching everything they owned burn. The bailiffs wouldn't even let them take the roof timbers to sell. "We're next," De said quietly. "His lordship won't keep a laborer who can't labor." That night, we held a family meeting. Uncle Patrick had written from Liverpool saying there was work in the factories, but the passage cost money we didn't have. America was even more expensive. We could go to the workhouse, but Granny flat refused. "I'll die on the road before I die in that place," she said. It was Granny who came up with the plan. She'd been talking to other old people, the ones who remembered the stories their grandparents told. There was supposed to be an abandoned village up in the mountains, left empty since Cromwell's time. The land was too poor for farming, which is why no landlord had claimed it. But there was forest all around, streams full of fish, and no gamekeepers to stop you taking what you needed. "It's probably just a story," De said. "Maybe," Granny agreed. "But what have we got to lose?" We left on a May morning, carrying everything we owned in 2 bundles. Ma had sewn our few coins into the hem of her skirt. We'd saved what food we could, some dried seaweed, acorn flour, the last of the Indian meal. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. The road was crowded with other evicted families. Some were heading for the ports, others for the workhouse, still others just walking with no destination in mind. We passed a family sitting by a stone wall, the children too weak to go on. Ma wanted to share our food, but De stopped her. "We can't save everyone," he said, and his voice was hard with the terrible arithmetic of survival. "We have to save ourselves." We walked for 2 days, following Granny's directions based on half-remembered stories. Up into the hills where the land was wild and empty. The roads became paths, then barely visible tracks through the heather. We slept in the ruins of an old stone circle the first night, huddled together for warmth. On the second evening, just when De was starting to mutter about wild goose chases, we saw it. A cluster of stone cottages in a valley, their roofs long gone but walls still standing. A stream ran through the middle, and forest pressed close on all sides. "Told you," Granny said, but she looked as surprised as the rest of us. The village was like something from a fairy story. Trees grew inside some of the cottages, and ivy covered the walls. But the stones were solid, and with work, we could make at least one cottage livable. Better still, we found an old apple orchard gone wild, the trees heavy with blossoms that promised fruit come autumn. We weren't the first to find this place. 2 other families had already claimed cottages, the Ryans from Skibbereen and the Doyles from Bantry. They looked at us suspiciously at first, but when they saw we had old Granny with us, they relaxed. Everyone respected the knowledge of the old people now. "There's fish in the stream," Mrs. Ryan told us. "Small ones, but plenty of them. And deer in the forest, if you're quiet enough." We chose a cottage at the edge of the village, close to the forest. Da and I worked to clear it out and patch the walls with mud and stones. Ma and Bridget gathered moss to stuff the cracks. We built a roof frame from fallen branches and covered it with sods of earth. It wouldn't last forever, but it would keep the rain out for now. Granny, meanwhile, explored our new territory with the energy of someone half her age. She came back with reports of hazel groves, wild strawberry patches, and a bog full of cranberries. The forest had pine nuts and mushrooms, though you had to be careful with those. "Never eat a mushroom you're not sure of," she warned. "The death cap looks innocent enough, but it'll kill you slow and painful." That first summer in the hidden village was like paradise after the horrors of the famine winter. We ate fish from the stream, trapped rabbits in snares made from twisted grass, gathered berries until our fingers were stained purple. The wild apple trees produced small, sour fruit that Ma turned into preserves for winter. We found wild cabbage and leeks, sorrel and wild spinach. The forest gave us hazelnuts and beech nuts, and the bog provided cranberries and bog beans. I learned to move silent as a shadow through the trees, watching for deer trails and rabbit runs. Bridget became expert at finding birds' nests, taking just 1 or 2 eggs and leaving the rest. Even little Tomash could spot edible plants now, toddling through the meadows with his collecting basket. We weren't getting fat, there was never quite enough for that, but we weren't starving either. Our hair grew glossy again, our skin lost its gray pallor, and Tomash started laughing like he used to. The other families shared their knowledge too. Mr. Ryan showed Da how to make fish traps from woven willow. Mrs. Doyle knew about preserving meat by smoking it over pine fires. We all worked together to build a communal store for winter, drying berries and mushrooms, smoking fish, gathering nuts. "It's like the old days," Granny said one evening, watching us all work together. "Before the English changed everything, this is how people lived. Taking what nature gave, sharing with neighbors, knowing the land like your own mother's face." News from the outside world came rarely. Occasionally someone would make the journey down to the nearest town for salt or other necessities. The stories they brought back were grim. The famine continued, the workhouses overflowed, the emigrant ships coffin ships, people called them, lost half their passengers to fever before reaching America. But in our hidden valley, life went on. We learned the rhythms of the wild food year. Spring brought young nettles and wild garlic, birds' eggs and early greens. Summer meant berries and fruits, fish running strong in the stream. Autumn was for nuts and mushrooms, late apples and rose hips. Winter was hardest, but we had our stores and knew where to find watercress and winter berries. I turned 10 in that valley, then 11. We marked the seasons not by calendar but by what was ready to harvest. First strawberries meant summer had truly come. Hazelnuts ripening meant prepare for autumn. When the cranberries were sweet, winter was on its way. We had close calls. Once, Tomash ate berries we hadn't checked first and was sick for days, Ma nursing him with tears streaming down her face. Another time, government men came looking for evicted tenants, and we all hid in the forest until they gave up and left. A harsh winter killed many of the fish in our stream, and we had to range farther for food. But we survived. More than survived, we learned to live again. De built furniture from forest wood. Ma made dyes from berries and bark, coloring the rough cloth she wove from nettles and wild flax. We children ran wild and free, brown as berries, speaking Irish again because there were no English landlords to forbid it. Other families found us over time. Some stayed, others moved on. We shared what we knew, teaching them Granny's wisdom about the wild foods. The village grew into a real community, hidden from the outside world, living as our ancestors had lived. Granny lived to see her fourth winter in the valley. She died peacefully in her sleep one December night, aged 74. We buried her under an oak tree, marking the grave with stones arranged in the old way. At her funeral, everyone spoke of how her knowledge had saved them. She gave us back our heritage, Mr. Ryan said. Taught us to see food where we saw only weeds. I thought about all the things Granny had taught me. Not just which plants to eat, but how to really see the world around me. How to read the seasons in the flight of birds, find direction by the growth of moss, predict weather by the behavior of insects. This knowledge was as much a part of me now as my own heartbeat. The Great Hunger officially ended in 1849, though people continued to die and emigrate for years after. We heard that the blight had finally run its course, that potatoes were growing healthy again. Some families left our valley, eager to return to their old lives. But we stayed. De said he'd never again depend on just one crop, no matter how easy it seemed. Ma had her garden now, growing a mix of tame and wild foods. We children couldn't imagine living anywhere else. I was 13 when a group of English naturalists found our valley. They were studying plants, they said, and were amazed to find people living off the land so successfully. They wanted to know everything: what we ate, how we prepared it, where we found it. One of them, a kind man named Dr. Morrison, was particularly interested in our use of seaweed and bog plants. He said scientists were just beginning to understand the nutritional value of these foods. He wrote down everything I told him, treating my knowledge with the same respect he'd give a university professor. "You've preserved something valuable here," he told me. "This knowledge of wild foods, it's disappearing everywhere else. People think it's backward, primitive. But you've proven it can mean the difference between life and death." He was right. In the years that followed, as Ireland slowly recovered from the famine, most people forgot the hard lessons of those terrible years. They went back to depending on potatoes, shopping at markets, forgetting that food grew wild all around them. But I never forgot. Even years later, when I'd grown up and moved to Cork City to work as a teacher, I'd find myself scanning the parks and waste ground for edible plants. I taught my own children what Granny had taught me, taking them on walks to identify wild foods. They'd roll their eyes, embarrassed by their odd father who got excited about nettles and seaweed. "You never know," I'd tell them. "The day might come when you need this knowledge." They'd laugh, secure in their world of shops and regular meals. But I'd seen how quickly that world could crumble. I'd seen families starve surrounded by food they didn't recognize. And I'd seen how the old knowledge, passed down through generations, could save lives when everything else failed. Sometimes, on summer evenings, I'd close my eyes and I was back in that hidden valley. I could taste the wild strawberries, sweet and warm from the sun. I could hear Granny's voice, patient and sure, teaching us to see abundance where others saw only wilderness. I could feel the weight of knowledge settling into my bones, becoming part of who I was. The Great Hunger took so much from Ireland. 1 million dead, another million fled across the sea. Families scattered, traditions broken, the Irish language itself nearly silenced. But in our small way, in that hidden valley, we'd preserved something precious. We'd remembered how to find food in a wild world, how to live with the land instead of just on it. And that knowledge, hard won through hunger and passed down with love, would never leave me. It was Granny's greatest gift, better than gold or land or any treasure. She'd taught us to survive, yes. But more than that, she'd taught us to see the world with different eyes, to find hope in the hedgerow, sustenance in the sea, life persisting even in the darkest times. That's the story I wanted to tell you. How a boy learned to find food in a wild world, guided by an old woman's wisdom and driven by the terrible teacher that is hunger. How we survived the Great Hunger not by waiting for rescue, but by remembering what had been forgotten. How the knowledge of generations, dismissed as backward and primitive, proved more valuable than all the modern improvements that had failed us. The wild foods are still there, you know. The nettles still grow in the ditches, the shellfish still cling to the rocks, the berries still ripen in their season. Most people pass by without seeing, but they're there. Waiting. Just in case we need them again. And sometimes, when I see children playing in the parks, I want to stop them and say, look closer. See that plant? You can eat that. And that mushroom will kill you, but this one is good as any from the market. The sea has food if you know where to look, and the forest will feed you if you learn its ways. But I don't. They'd think me mad, this old man talking about eating weeds. So I just smile and walk on, carrying Granny's knowledge like a secret treasure, ready to share with anyone who truly needs to know. Because you never know when the world might change again. You never know when the shops might empty and the crops might fail. You never know when survival might depend on seeing food where others see only wilderness. The knowledge is there, waiting in the memories of old people, hidden in half-forgotten stories, growing wild at the edges of our tame world. All we have to do is remember how to see it. And that's the most important thing Granny taught me, there in that desperate spring of 1847 when the potatoes rotted in the ground and death walked the roads of Ireland. She taught me that knowledge, real knowledge, earned through generations of living close to the land, can never truly be lost. It just waits, patient as seeds in the soil, ready to sprout again when the need arises. We survived the Great Hunger by becoming gatherers again, like our ancestors before agriculture, before cities, before any of the modern world that had failed us so completely. We survived by remembering what civilization had taught us to forget. And in the end, that's what saved us. Not government relief, not charity from England, not the workhouse or the emigrant ship. Just an old woman's knowledge of which weeds could fill your belly, and the courage to trust in the wild providence of the land itself. That's my story. The story of the first gatherers or the last, depending on how you look at it. The story of how we found food in a wild world, and in doing so, found ourselves again.